The vast majority of folks who engage in recreation, as in nature users, are not giving back. They are not what I would call nature lovers. And I wonder if there is a way to get that shift to happen. Welcome, Wild Ones. This is Josh Schlossberg, host of the Green Root Podcast, the official podcast of Eco Integrity Alliance, where we're on a quest to uncover the roots of the ecological crisis. For this episode, I want to talk about whether or not you consider yourself a nature lover or a nature user. And of course, I'm not actually talking about you, I'm talking about other people. But let's explore this concept together, shall we? So if you are someone's lover, you care for them, right? You contribute as much as you take, hopefully. That Beatles song, in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make, something like that, right? So that's the idea. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement, or at least you are not just extracting from that other individual. That is what being a lover or a good lover might be. Without getting too deep into that topic, that's a whole other podcast right there. Now, lover or user, if you use somebody, you're just there to take. I want something from you. I'm not giving anything back. I consider you just to be an object, me. You don't even count. That is clearly the difference, I would say, between being a lover and a user. And one could even say an abuser is when you take it even further and you are not just callous towards the needs of the other individual, but you are actually actively harming them. So what we're dealing with right now when it comes to nature is we have some nature lovers, but we have a lot of nature users, and then we have the nature abusers. So let's go over these pieces, see where you fall. I know where you fall, but see where other folks fall and see if there's a way that we might be able to call attention to this and maybe shift folks from abuser to user, at least that's better, I guess, and ideally abuser or user to lover. So we all like being out in nature. If you care about nature, you want to be a part of it. Even if you don't think you are, you're drinking it and breathing it. So we all benefit from nature. But there are some of us who are saying, hey, we need to really protect nature. And those are folks not necessarily who just do advocacy, but certainly advocates, people who take the time to call attention to what's going on in the natural world, the harms, the impacts, and how we can have positive visions moving forward, having a mission to get there, all of that wonderful stuff. So that is, I would say, the best form of being a nature lover. It also can be the appreciation of nature, knowing it's there, being grateful for it. Yet, all of us who are nature lovers, yes, to a certain extent, we use nature, right? We go out there, let's just say in terms of recreation. We like to go hiking, biking, skiing, boating, whatever your thing is. A lot of recreationists are also fishing and hunting, and some use motorized recreation. So I think that a lot of people who are recreationists, who are in part users, also can be and are nature lovers. But I have to say, the vast majority of folks who engage in recreation, as in nature users, are not giving back. They are not what I would call nature lovers. And I wonder if there is a way to get that shift to happen. So I'm going to come back to that in a second, but I just want to flesh out the three concepts of lover, user, and abuser. The abusers are obviously the extraction industries, the extraction agencies like oftentimes the U.S. Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, across the board, county open space, state forest service, all of those entities that are doing extraction on public lands. I'm sure they have some folks in there who are maybe nature lovers and just nature users, but there is a lot of nature abusing going on there. These are the elected officials that advocate for it or turn a blind eye to any of the impacts. And these are the NGOs that are cheerleading this or even getting government money, taxpayer funding to do extraction on public land. So yes, the Nature Conservancy has shifted from being a conservation group where they do some conservation to carry out schemes on public lands, including extraction, which is logging and ranching. So those folks, I would say, could fall into the abuser category, as well as individuals who support that to a certain degree. So that's the framing I have of nature lover, nature user, nature abuser. So let's get back to the nature users, because the nature abusers are going to be harder to deal with. So nature users. So I live in Colorado, and man, I don't even go hiking on the weekends. I change my schedule around so I can hike in the middle of the week because there's so many people out there utilizing the landscape. You get stuck in traffic jams just to get to trailheads. It's almost like mini Coachellas out there with the amount of people. And one would think, this is awesome. Look at how many people are nature lovers. But then you talk to them and you want to engage them in some form of advocacy. There are definitely plenty of those folks who can convert over or frankly are already doing that. But the vast majority, they're not interested. They're just like, I am here to use the land. Now, again, I have done tabling at trailheads where there is active or past or future logging, and I talk to people. And I would say most people are at least interested, and the majority of people who actually see the logging are concerned, but actually engaging them into further action, it works sometimes, but it's very difficult. So this idea of folks who want to be out there on the landscape, but don't really want to give back, it's worth figuring out why that is. Is it that they're lazy? I don't know. We're all lazy a little bit. We all have time constraints, but I don't think it's simply that they're lazy. I think sometimes they're getting conflicting information and have been brainwashed. So there are people who think because they have been told and it's been crammed down their throat by industry agencies, elected official media, and the working lands, quote, extractive NGOs, that logging is good for the landscape, that ranching is great, even mining and drilling, I guess, is what they may think, or at least it's not that harmful, or there's nothing you can do about it. So we're just out here to enjoy ourselves. So I think there is a lot of what I would call misinformation, which is accidentally put out, but disinformation, intentional falsehoods put out to the public. And that's keeping them from really knowing what's going on. So I think that's part of it. But I have to say it goes deeper. And while your average individual, I think, can be shifted from user to lover, the recreation organizations that sort of do advocacy, that engage in policy, that engage with media, that supposedly speak for the recreation community, they are really not on the side of the nature lover. I hate to say it. I don't want to be the person who comes out against recreation. I've never wanted to be that. Eco Integrity Alliance has been very cautious in that regard because we still see recreationists as allies. All of us are recreationists. I prefer to hike. That's my thing. I just use my body to go out there and see the land. I don't need an adrenaline thrill beyond that. I do some cross-country skiing as well. But if you've done that, you know there's the only adrenaline is just trying not to fall down or seeing if you can get up that hill and get home before you freeze to death. But there are a lot of folks who are potentially, who can be converted over. The entities themselves seem to be only interested in more access. as in we want to be able to do whatever it takes to have more trails or more for motorized trails, more getting into the forest, more the term is access. So this can be climbers in terms of being able to put in I forget the terminology of this, the fixed screws in there in wilderness, etc. Obviously, a lot of the mountain biking community has just been about more trails, and that's about it. Motorized, even more so. There's fishers who are great conservationists, but also it's mostly about, do I get to fish everywhere? And same with hunters. So these entities seem to be like, well, we're just here to make sure that you can do as much of that recreation as possible. And I don't think that even makes sense as a mission. And I know there are some entities that do care and do engage, like surf riders that are about surfing, but also protecting natural world. Keep in mind that a lot of conservation that's going on right now is actually extraction, but and pretend conservation, destroying forests, pretending it's protecting them from wildfires is one of the number one, quote, fake conservation things going on right now. But these entities that do recreation, is there a way that they could be convinced to broaden their scope? I'll tell you a couple experiences thus far and how it ties into something going on in Colorado right now. But there is a place called Rocky Flats in Colorado, and it is, if not the most contaminated, it is one of the most contaminated areas in the United States, probably the world. It's a place outside of between Boulder and Denver that once manufactured plutonium pits or triggers for nuclear weapons. And there was a pretty half-assed cleanup, and there is still plutonium and other deadly toxics on the landscape there that are getting blown around in the wind. And the area, once it was shut down, the area was, barely cleaned up. And the surrounding area was made into a national wildlife refuge. The idea is that would protect it from development, because you don't want people building there. Now, people are building all around this refuge and getting plutonium in their systems, sadly. But there was a lot of uproar around opening the wildlife refuge to trails, and a lot of folks they actually did studies out there and found, there was plutonium in the refuge, and the argument is, it's too low to matter. All it takes is one particle inhaled, and that matters. And so there were environmentalists who were engaged with this. At the time, I was actually working as a journalist, so I was the reporter on Rocky Flats for Boulder Weekly, because that topic needs somebody to focus on them. So I ended up being the one, even though that was not my original intention. But I was following it very closely. And who was supporting the opening of the trails? It was the mountain biking associations. All they cared about was more and more trails, even though there's plutonium on the trail. Mountain bikes, they kick up dust more than anything else. And so at that point, I was pretty taken aback. I was like, oh man, one of the biggest environmental tragedies in the centuries in the United States in this area, and the mountain biker, at least the association, is on the wrong side of this. And so I had seen that, and a lot of other recreation entities, particularly motorized vehicles, but also mountain biking and hunting and fishing, is about getting into the forest. So not shutting down logging roads that should be decommissioned, because that's genuine restoration. And that's the most likely vector for wildfire, since nearly all wildfires are started close to a road, and about 84% of them are human caused in terms of just wildfires in general. So logging, in their mind, creates more roads and it gives them more access. So they're on the wrong side of that as well. And even trying to engage the hiking groups, they don't tend to support a lot of the terrible stuff. Maybe they do. I'd have to look a little more into that. I'm sure some of them do support, quote, this wildfire pretense or wildfire pretext logging in the name of fake conservation. but they don't come out against it. Years ago when I moved to Colorado, there was all this clear cutting in national forests alongside the Colorado Trail. And I don't believe that the entity that moves that forward or the hiking groups said a word, mostly because all these entities, maybe they do have concerns, but they work with the government, the Forest Service, and they don't want to critique them to lose access. Well, then you are a nature user. And the biggest version of nature user that I think is actually turning into nature abuser is something called the Clearcut Initiative here in Colorado. And it is a state ballot initiative that is being paid for in terms of the signature collection by the Nature Conservancy, an entity called Western Resource Advocates, and is supported by Conservation Colorado. So these are the biggest, well, they have the most money in terms of the biggest. So they have the most employees, and they are promoting this measure that would route sporting goods tax towards supposedly recreation, conservation, and preventing wildfires. Now, I go on and on about Clearcut Initiative 308 in a previous podcast. So if you want the details there, go to that. So, but the real brief overview is that initiative the language is fraudulent. You don't prevent wildfires by logging. I mean, you don't even protect communities or reduce high severity wildfire, which high severity wildfire is a natural and essential process in forests anyway. But you don't prevent wildfire by logging. It doesn't even make physical sense. It's just a false statement made to deceive people. So there's that piece. And then there's the fact that it's unconstitutional because there are three pieces to it. And there is something called the single subject rule in the Colorado Constitution that says you have to focus on one subject to avoid what they call log rolling, ironically enough, smushing all these topics together to sort of push something through. So there's recreation, fake conservation, and fake wildfire prevention. Those are three different topics. And anyway, this is such a Trojan horse because we have so many recreationists in Colorado, as in users. So the abusers learned, let's sneak in the abuse through the users. Now, the users may not want to abuse, right? They may not be great lovers, but they don't want to intentionally hurt their partner, in my weird analogy here. Don't make love to nature. It can't consent. So I just want to put that out there. But you can love nature and engage in it in other forms. So the abusers are taking advantage of the users' only interest in just what they can get out of it. And in doing so, they are harming the natural ecosystems, the wildlands and wildlife, because this measure would increase logging. So it funds supposed recreation, it funds fake conservation, and it funds non-existent wildfire prevention to do more logging. So this is where it's all come to a head for me. And I think I'm finally willing to start speaking up about some of the industrial recreation. Again, keeping in mind that we all recreate, that is definitely a part of, I think, what should happen on at least some of the lands. We may have to start talking about some lands where we don't recreate. And there are some seasonal closures and sometimes things like that. That's very unpopular. And that's not going to be our focus right now at Eco Integrity Alliance. But we do have to start the conversation because the users are basically holding water for the abusers. And if the users don't start speaking up, we have to kind of lump them in that category. They're at least helping the abuse happen. So hopefully that's a decent overview of these concepts and why we have to start questioning some aspects of recreation. And I would say the way to redeem it is, are you a recreationist? You got to get your entities, your organizations to start speaking up for protecting the land and not just getting people on the landscape. Now, that's difficult enough to do even in the conservation movement. I mean, we've seen the shift of a lot of these entities that once did conservation, and they're now extraction entities. So I'm not saying this is easy. I'm just saying that if the recreation community and the organizations want to maintain their credibility as being partners of the land, they have to step it up. And like what we're seeing, this ballot measure is just this perfect example of what has happened with not addressing this elephant of the room, which is the users, the recreationists, not willing to give back. They're just taking. So do you have any ideas about how to get more folks to speak up? I think first is, are you a recreationist? Are you a member of a recreation group? Will you contact the leadership or however that works there and say, hey, we've got to come out against these logging projects. We have to come out against this ranching and drilling and mining. We can't just remain this apolitical entity or just this entity that is just about the human use of the land, because now we're just not much better than the extractors. We're turning a blind eye to the extraction, and now we're giving cover to the extractors. So that might be the way forward. Maybe it's starting new organizations that are recreationists for nature protection. And I know they're out there, and I can't name any off the top of my head, but hopefully you can. So put some in the comments of these entities that are about recreation, like surf riders, but also are about having genuine responsibility to the natural world. And I don't mean fake versions of it like, oh, don't worry, we love more logging to protect it. No, doesn't count. Opposite of count, abuse. And maybe there are some other ways to start shifting that conversation. But I just see these throngs of people and I'm like, they're all on our side. And then you're like, man, I'm not sure if they are. So how do we get that to happen? I think carrot and the stick, like always, is helpful. I do think we need to have carrot. Like, thank you so much for being a part of all this great stuff and loving the land like we do. Do you want to engage more? So that's mostly the approach that I've been taking, but it might be time for a stick. It might be time for, if recreationists don't step up their game, we're going to start as the nature lovers and genuine conservationists start advocating for closing trails. We're going to start advocating that recreation is diminished in forests, and that's not going to be super popular on public lands. It's not going to be super popular, and I'm not saying that's what we do. I do know that there are specific fights, like places in Montana, where there is extremely sensitive habitat, including for grizzly bears, and mountain bikers are causing a lot of issues. And the problem is when these recreation entities are kind of like the NRA in that they're saying, we will never back down on anything that isn't moving forward. Now, you can argue that's a good advocacy to just say if issue you care about is guns or fishing or recreation, you would in every case say, I want more of that. And what's funny is the only advocacy movement that doesn't do that is the nature protection, the conservation movement. We're the only ones that won't draw a line in the sand and only speak out for the natural world in every case. Eco Integrity Alliance, we do that, and that marginalizes us, and we've been demonized for daring to do normal advocacy, which is this good for nature? We support it. If it's not, we don't, or we'll at least stand aside and not fight that battle in some cases, but we're never going to support that. So I think the hunters are also another potential group that could be on our side, but I think we have to be honest. For the most part, they're not. They can be, some of them are, but overall they are not. What can shift that over? I've done a video with somebody up here in Colorado who is a hunter. He hunts for food. He hunts deer and elk, and he was very concerned about the wildfire pretext logging that is destroying the habitat. And he spoke out about that, and I included him on a video. Now, not everyone's a fan of hunting, so some people in our movement didn't like how we were sharing that person's voice. I'm going to share the voice of anyone who has any overlap whatsoever. So these recreationists don't have to be purists, but I would like to see them actually advocate for more nature protection. I think that can happen with hunters, at least some. I think it can happen with fishers, anglers, and I think it can happen with other folks and mountain bikers and maybe even ATV folks, but they have to stop looking at nature as just a backdrop for their human activity. That's part of it, but that is just use, and it may be in some cases abuse. It's not, you're not being a good lover. And sometimes I make a joke saying, well, if this is just backdrop for them, why don't we make some ATV and mountain bike trails in a warehouse somewhere where it goes up and down in different terrain, and then have a green screen in the background of just what a forest is? Because if it's just a background for them anyway, they're not really engaging in nature, listening to it, smelling it, taking the time to just, feel the soil, things like that, then isn't that good enough for them? But what I'm saying right now is I want to focus on the carrot approach and see if more folks in the recreation community across the board, like I mentioned, the entities themselves can start shifting a little more into nature loving. At the very least, not allow themselves to be cover for the nature abusers. And if that carrot, and we have to try the carrot for a while, right? You hold the carrot in front of a horse, maybe they don't see it, maybe they don't like that version of the carrot, whatever. If there's a time when it's clear the carrot doesn't work, it's time to take out the sticks. So that's how we do things in advocacy. These are my opinions in terms of recreation, the idea of nature lover, nature user, nature abuser. This isn't even the official policy of Eco Integrity Alliance. This is just me kicking around ideas, asking for your help. So in summation, are you a recreationist that wants to speak up more? Do you know of other entities, or would you be willing to start up an entity that is recreationists for nature loving? Don't call it that because that's terrible, but that's the concept behind this. Hopefully this is useful, thought-provoking. Maybe it got you upset. Good, leave a comment. I'll respond to it, or somebody will, and we can get the engagement up. And yeah, last thing I'll say is thanks for watching, listening here on YouTube. We do really well with our distribution of the podcast on Substack and do pretty well with audio RSS, but for some reason our YouTube views are so erratic, it doesn't even make any sense. We get a lot of views one week and then another week hardly anything. So any engagement you can do on this really makes a difference. The big creators are telling you this all the time. They don't need your help. We're a small creator. You liking this, you commenting on this, you sharing this actually does make a difference in the algorithm. And the reason we're not getting this far enough out there is not enough of you are engaging. And, I'm an advocate. I'm going to say that, right? I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We need your help, right? So don't just consume the media. Help put it out there. Engage in it. I want to hear what you have to say. That's what this is all about. I'm just the guy talking right now. It doesn't just have to be me. That's why we have the guests on every other week. But for right now, this is what we're doing. Help us get the word out. Help us put it out in the world. Just share it a little bit. You can even have that caveat, I don't agree with everything here, but this is worth listening to. So now that I noticed that my shirt was askew the entire time, I will close this and thank you for all of your engagement, nature lovers.